What if the person you loved most was living a lie you never suspected? My sister, an airline pilot, called me. I need to ask you something strange. Your husband, is he home right now? Yes, I replied. He's sitting in the living room. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That can't be true, because I'm watching him with another woman right now. They just boarded my flight to Paris. Just then, I heard the door open behind me. Stay with the hidden truths to uncover a deception so shocking, it'll leave you questioning everything. My sister Kayle's voice crackled through the phone from the cockpit of United Flight 447. I was standing in our Manhattan apartment kitchen, watching Aiden through the doorway as he sat reading his morning paper. Yes, I said slowly. He's sitting in the living room. The silence that followed felt wrong. Then Kayle whispered the words that shattered my entire world. That can't be true, because I'm watching him with another woman right now. They just boarded my flight to Paris. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Aiden walked into the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, smiling at me with the same expression he'd worn every morning for 7 years. The coffee mug was the one I'd bought him for his 40th birthday, white ceramic with "World's Most Adequate Husband" printed in black letters. He'd laughed when he opened it, said it was perfect because he never trusted anyone who claimed to be the best at anything. That was 3 years ago, back when his self-deprecating humor felt charming instead of calculated. Who's calling so early? Aiden asked, moving toward the coffee maker for a refill. His Saturday morning routine never varied. Coffee, Financial Times, light breakfast, then his squash game at the athletic club by 11 o'clock. I gripped the phone tighter, Kayle's breathing audible through the speaker. She was waiting for me to say something, to react, to make sense of what couldn't possibly make sense. My husband stood 5 feet away from me in our kitchen. My husband was also apparently sitting in business class at JFK Airport with another woman. How deep does this betrayal go? Keep watching with the hidden truths to find out. Just Kayle? I managed, surprised at how normal my voice sounded. Pre-flight check-in. Aiden nodded absently, pouring coffee with his left hand while scrolling through his phone with his right. Kayle said hello. Maybe we'll finally take her up on those flight benefits she's always offering. The irony of his words made my stomach twist. I watched him move through our kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there. 7 years of marriage had created these patterns, where we kept the sugar, how he liked his coffee, the way he always stood at the counter rather than sitting at the breakfast bar. Kayle, I'll call you back, I said quietly. Ava, wait. I need to tell you. Her voice carried the same urgency she'd had 3 years ago when she called about Dad's heart attack. That call had come on a Tuesday morning, too. I'd been standing in this same kitchen making breakfast when my world tilted off its axis. I'll call you back, I repeated and ended the call. Aiden glanced up from his phone. Everything all right? You look pale. Did I? I caught my reflection in the microwave door, same auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, same green eyes my father had given me, same face that had looked back at me every morning for 37 years. But Kayle's words had changed something fundamental. The kitchen felt different now, like when you notice a picture frame has been hanging crooked for months. Just tired, I said, reaching for my own coffee mug. My hands were steady. 20 years of working as a forensic accountant had taught me to maintain composure when discovering that nothing was what it seemed. CEOs had sat across from me, lying through their teeth about missing millions, while I nodded, took notes, and gathered evidence. You should go back to bed, Aiden suggested, his British accent wrapping around the words with familiar warmth. That accent had charmed me at a mutual friend's dinner party 8 years ago. He'd been explaining the difference between rugby and American football, gesturing wildly with a glass of wine, accidentally spilling it on my dress. His mortification had been endearing. Or had it been? Maybe I will, I said, studying his face, the same angular jaw, the same green eyes with gold flecks, the same small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. Every detail exactly as it should be. My phone buzzed. A text from Kayle. Look at this now. A photo appeared. Through an airplane window, I could see the interior of business class. There, in seat 3B, sat a man in a blue Tom Ford suit. The The photo was taken from an angle, but the profile was unmistakable. The way he held his head, the curve of his jaw, the particular way he gestured while talking. Aiden, my Aiden, talking animatedly to a blonde woman who looked about 25, her hand resting on his forearm with casual intimacy. I looked up at the Aiden in our kitchen, gray cashmere sweater, reading glasses pushed up into his hair, that same wedding ring on his left hand that we'd chosen together at a small jeweler in Soho. Actually, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I think I'll make pancakes. Pancakes. He raised an eyebrow. On a Tuesday? What's the occasion? The occasion was that my sister was watching my husband on a plane while my husband stood in our kitchen. And one of these realities had to be false. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening. Can a wife make pancakes for her husband without needing a reason? He smiled, that particular half-smile that used to make my heart skip. Of course. Though, you know I have squash at 11. Plenty of time, I said, pulling ingredients from the pantry, flour, eggs, milk. Simple things that made sense, unlike the photo on my phone showing my husband in 2 places at once. As I measured flour into a bowl, I thought about the small inconsistencies I dismissed over the past few months. The night he'd come home from a client dinner smelling like a perfume I didn't recognize. The weekend he'd gone to Boston for a conference I later couldn't find any record of online. The way he'd been perfect lately, too perfect. No forgotten anniversaries, no socks left on the bedroom floor, no irritating habits that had once driven me crazy but now seemed oddly absent. I love you, Aiden said suddenly, walking over to kiss my forehead. His lips were warm, familiar. I love you, too. I replied automatically, the words hollow as the measuring cup in my hand. He returned to his newspaper, settling back into his morning routine. I watched him turn the pages with precise movements, each gesture exactly, as I remembered. But memory, I was learning, could be manufactured. Reality could be edited. And somewhere between my kitchen and JFK Airport, my marriage had split into 2 versions. One of them was a lie. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Kale. Don't let that plane take off. But even as I hit send, I knew it was too late. The engines were already running. The door was already closed. And whatever game was being played in my life had already begun. The sound of the apartment door closing echoed through the hallway as Aiden left for his squash game. I stood at the window, watching him exit our building, his gym bag slung over his shoulder, that confident stride unchanged after all these years. He turned left toward the athletic club, just as he did every Tuesday and Saturday. Normal, predictable, except nothing felt normal anymore. The moment he disappeared around the corner, I moved with purpose toward his home office. The mahogany desk we'd bought at an estate sale in the Hamptons sat beneath his diplomas from Cambridge and Harvard Business School. Everything meticulously organized, as always. But organization, I'd learned from years of forensic accounting, often masked the most elaborate deceptions. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint accounts, my fingers moving across the keyboard with the same precision I used when tracking embezzled funds for Fortune 500 companies. The credit card statements loaded slowly, each month revealing a pattern that made my chest tighten. There it was, a charge at the Tokyo Mandarin Oriental from March 15th through 18th. I remembered that weekend, clearly. Aiden had supposedly driven to Connecticut to help his mother reorganize her garage after his father's death. I'd offered to go with him, but he'd insisted I stay home and rest after a particularly grueling audit. The hotel charge was for 2 guests, room service for 2, spa treatments for 2. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled further. Dubai, the 4 Seasons, a weekend when he'd claimed to be at client dinners in Midtown. I'd been home with food poisoning, too sick to question why his client meetings required overnight stays at hotels 40 minutes from our apartment. I pulled up his business credit card next. More hotels, more restaurants I'd never heard him mention, jewelry purchases from Cartier that had never materialized as gifts for me. My methodical brain, trained to spot financial irregularities, cataloged each discrepancy while my heart tried to rationalize them away. Maybe they were client gifts. Maybe the hotels were for visiting executives. Maybe there was an explanation that didn't involve my husband living an entirely separate life.
My phone rang.
Sophia Chen's name appeared on the screen. "I'm 15 minutes away," she said without preamble. "And Ava, you need to prepare yourself. What I found, it's extensive." Sophia and I had been roommates at NYU, both studying accounting before our paths diverged, mine toward forensic investigation, hers toward what she cryptically called private intelligence. Her divorce from Richard, the Wall Street trader who'd been sleeping with his 23-year-old assistant, had transformed her from corporate analyst to someone who specialized in marital reconnaissance. While waiting for her, I continued my investigation. Our joint investment accounts showed regular activity, but when I dug deeper, I found withdrawals I didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, always just below the threshold that would trigger automatic alerts. The kind of systematic siphoning I'd seen in countless fraud cases, except this time it was happening in my own accounts. The doorbell rang. Sophia stood there in her typical all-black ensemble, tablet clutched against her chest, her expression grim. She'd worn that same look when she discovered Richard's affair, when she'd had to tell me about my father's secret gambling debts after his death, when life demanded brutal honesty between friends. "Show me," I said, leading her to the dining room table. She opened her tablet, fingers flying across the screen with practiced efficiency. "The woman your sister saw him with is Madison Vale, 26 years old, pharmaceutical sales representative for Silex Industries." A photo appeared, blonde, conventionally beautiful in that polished way that suggested expensive maintenance. She's been working the Manhattan territory for 2 years. Her social media is mostly private, but I managed to access some tagged photos. The images that followed made my stomach plummet. Madison and Aiden at a restaurant I didn't recognize, Madison and Aiden at what looked like a hotel bar in Miami, Madison and Aiden at a charity gala, the same night I'd been in Boston for a conference. "How long?" My voice sounded distant, like someone else was asking. "Based on the digital footprint, at least 3 months. But Ava, that's not the strangest part." Sophia pulled up another screen. "I accessed your building's security footage through a contact. Look at this." The video showed our apartment building's lobby from last Tuesday. There was Aiden, entering at 6:47 p.m., briefcase in hand. The timestamp matched when he'd arrived home from work. Everything looked normal until Sophia zoomed in. "Watch his shadow," she said. The shadow fell at the wrong angle, flickered slightly when he passed under the chandelier. Details invisible to casual observation but glaring to someone looking for deception. "This is deepfake technology," Sophia explained. "Someone has been inserting fabricated footage into your building's security system. This isn't amateur work. We're talking about sophisticated software that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement properly." I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what this meant. Why would someone go to such lengths? That's what we need to figure out. But there's more. She pulled up another file. "I spoke to a few of your neighbors discreetly. Mrs. Patterson from 20C mentioned something interesting." Mrs. Patterson, 78 years old, lived alone with her 2 Persian cats, spent most of her time watching the hallway through her peephole, the building's unofficial security system. She said she saw Aiden leaving with suitcases 3 months ago, the weekend you were at that conference in Boston. She remembered specifically because he helped her with her groceries on his way out, said he was going away for a while. I remembered that weekend. The conference had been mandatory, 2 days of mind-numbing presentations about new SEC regulations. I'd come home Sunday evening to find Aiden cooking dinner, rosemary chicken, my favorite. He'd said he'd spent the weekend organizing his home office and catching up on sleep. The office had looked exactly the same. But I came home, and he was here. I said, the words feeling thick in my throat. Was he? Or was someone who looked exactly like him? The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table, my accountant's brain trying to create logical columns where none existed. That's insane. People don't just get replaced. No, Sophia agreed, her voice gentle but firm. They don't. Not without significant resources and planning. Ava, has Aiden been working on anything sensitive? Any deals or projects that might make him a target? I thought about his recent work, mergers, acquisitions, the usual investment banking activities. Nothing that seemed worth this level of elaborate deception, unless there was something he hadn't told me about. Another secret to add to the growing pile. I need to see more footage, I said, my voice steadier now. Every entry and exit for the past 3 months, credit card receipts, phone records, everything. Sophia nodded, already typing. I'll get what I can, but Ava, you need to be careful. Whoever is doing this, whether it's Aiden or someone else, they've invested serious resources. This isn't a simple affair. This is something else entirely. Sophia left after giving me an encrypted phone to contact her, warning me to act normally until we understood the full scope of what was happening. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of suspended animation, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, organizing files that were already organized, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind raced through possibilities that seemed increasingly insane. At 5:30, I heard Aiden's key in the lock, the man who might not be Aiden. The stranger who'd been living in my home, sharing my bed, playing the role of my husband with such precision that I never questioned it until today. I arranged my face into something resembling calm and started preparing dinner. Something smells amazing, he called out. Same as always, the routine so familiar it felt like muscle memory. I decided to make shrimp scampi, my grandmother's recipe from Naples. The garlic and white wine sauce filled the apartment with its rich aroma. This particular dish held significance in our relationship. The real Aiden had a severe shellfish allergy, documented by 3 emergency room visits over the years. His medical alert bracelet, worn religiously for 7 years, specifically listed shellfish as life-threatening. Your favorite, I said, setting the plate in front of him. My voice sounded normal, even pleasant. 20 years of maintaining composure during fraud investigations had taught me to compartmentalize panic. He looked at the dish with what appeared to be genuine delight. You haven't made this in ages. That was true. I hadn't made it because my husband would die if he ate it. But this man picked up his fork without hesitation, twirling the linguine with practiced ease, bringing a shrimp to his mouth with appreciation. No reaction, no swelling, no reaching for an EpiPen, just a man enjoying his dinner. This is incredible, he said, taking another bite. Your grandmother would be proud. My grandmother had been dead for 15 years, but she would have been horrified to see me serving shellfish to someone I was testing like a laboratory specimen. I watched him eat, cataloging every gesture, every expression, looking for the seams in his performance. So, I was thinking, I said, refilling his wine glass with the measured calm of someone discussing the weather. We should visit your mother this weekend. The real Aiden would have immediately manufactured an excuse. His relationship with his mother was complicated at best, toxic at worst. She'd never approved of me, never forgiven him for marrying outside their social circle. Our visits to Connecticut were carefully rationed, usually requiring weeks of negotiation. That sounds wonderful, he replied without missing a beat. She'll be thrilled to see us. Thrilled. His mother had never been thrilled about anything involving me. I felt my phone recording from its position behind the fruit bowl, capturing this conversation that would later serve as evidence of what? That my husband had been replaced by someone who actually liked his mother? We could stay the whole weekend, I continued, pushing harder. Help her with that garden project she mentioned. Perfect. I'll call her after dinner to let her know. The real Aiden would rather have dental surgery without anesthesia than spend a weekend doing manual labor for his mother. This man was failing every test, yet succeeding perfectly at being a better version of my husband. After dinner, we settled onto the couch for our usual evening routine. Netflix, mild conversation about our days, the comfortable silence of a long-married couple. Except nothing about this felt comfortable anymore. Every gesture he made, every word he spoke, felt like watching a highly skilled puppeteer manipulate strings I couldn't see. I'm exhausted, I announced at 10, stretching in an exaggerated way. That audit today really wore me out. You work too hard, he said, kissing my forehead. The lips were warm, the pressure familiar, but wrong in some indefinable way. In our bedroom, I changed into pajamas while he brushed his teeth. The sounds from the bathroom were perfect, the electric toothbrush for exactly 2 minutes, the mouthwash gargle, the face-washing routine. Someone had studied my husband's habits with anthropological precision. When he climbed into bed beside me, I forced myself to remain still. He turned on his side, facing away from me, his breathing evening out within minutes. The real Aiden was a chronic insomniac who usually read until well past midnight. This man fell asleep like someone without worries, without secrets, without a stolen identity weighing on his conscience. I waited, counting his breaths, until I was certain he was deeply asleep. Then I slipped out of bed with the careful movements of someone defusing a bomb. His briefcase sat in its usual spot beside the dresser, leather worn soft from years of use. The real Aiden's briefcase, carried by an impostor. Inside, the usual contents appeared normal at first glance. Laptop, various files, business cards. But beneath a stack of investment portfolios, I found an envelope that didn't belong. My fingers trembled as I extracted its contents. A passport made out to Marcus Webb, address in Queens, an actors' union card. But most damning were the handwritten notes, pages and pages in someone else's handwriting, documenting my life in excruciating detail. My morning routine, down to which coffee mug I preferred. My speech patterns, with certain phrases highlighted. Details about our relationship history that read like a script prepared for an audition. Ava likes her coffee, with 1 sugar, no cream. She calls her sister every Tuesday and Thursday. Anniversary is October 15th. She expects flowers, but pretends she doesn't. Her father died 3 years ago, sensitive subject. She tears up during the final scene of Casablanca every time. Our entire marriage reduced to bullet points, a character study for someone preparing to play the role of devoted husband. At the bottom of the last page, a note in different handwriting. 3 months maximum. Maintain cover until transfer complete. 3 months. This performance had an expiration date. I slipped the papers back into Marcus' briefcase with trembling fingers, my mind processing the implications of transfer complete. Transfer of what? Our assets? The apartment? My entire life? I photographed each page with the encrypted phone Sophia had given me, then crept back to bed, where the stranger wearing my husband's face continued sleeping peacefully. The next morning, Sunday, I watched Marcus perform his morning routine with newfound clarity. Every gesture was studied, every word carefully chosen. When he mentioned needing to go to the gym, I manufactured an urgent client crisis that required immediate attention at my office. He barely looked up from his tablet, waving goodbye with the distraction of someone whose mind was already elsewhere. My office building stood empty on Sunday morning, just security guards and the ghosts of financial crimes. I locked myself in my corner office overlooking Park Avenue and opened my laptop with the determination of someone about to perform surgery on their own life. The forensic accounting software I used to track corporate fraud would now dissect my personal finances. I started with our joint checking account. The past 3 months revealed a pattern so subtle I would have missed it without looking specifically for theft. Transfers of $9,999, just below the federal reporting threshold, moving to accounts I didn't recognize. The receiving banks were in the Caymans, notorious for their privacy laws and resistance to international investigation. Each transfer had been authorized with my husband's credentials during times when Marcus had been sitting across from me at dinner or sleeping beside me in bed. The real Aiden was somewhere else, systematically bleeding our accounts, while his hired double kept me distracted with perfect impersonations of domestic bliss. I traced the money through 3 shell companies, each registered in different jurisdictions, each leading to another dead end. Lux Corp International in the Caymans, Meridian Holdings in Panama, Apex Investments in Cyprus. Corporate structures designed to launder money and hide assets from people exactly like me. The trail went cold at Swiss banks whose privacy laws were legendary. $400,000 from our investment portfolio, $600,000 from the home equity line we'd never used, another $300,000 from various retirement accounts, all taken as loans that wouldn't trigger immediate alerts. $1.3 million methodically extracted while I slept next to a stranger who'd memorized my coffee preferences. But the money was just the beginning. When I accessed my professional client database, I found something worse. Login records showed access from IP addresses I didn't recognize, downloads of sensitive financial data from 3 major corporate audits I'd conducted, information that, in the wrong hands, could facilitate insider trading worth tens of millions. I pulled up Madison Vale's professional profile. Pharmaceutical sales representative seemed like a cover story now. Her LinkedIn showed connections to several hedge fund managers, the kind who operated in legal gray areas and weren't particular about where their information originated. Her travel history on social media aligned perfectly with suspicious trades in pharmaceutical stocks that had occurred just before major FDA announcements. They weren't just stealing from me. They were using my reputation, my access, my client relationships to commit federal crimes. Every unauthorized login, every stolen file, every suspicious trade would trace back to my credentials. If discovered, I wouldn't just lose money. I'd lose my license, my career, potentially my freedom. I needed help beyond what Sophia could provide. Grace Morrison answered on the third ring, her voice rough with sleep. We'd been friends since she was an ambitious prosecutor and I was testifying as an expert witness in fraud cases. Her divorce from a judge who'd been taking bribes had ended her career at the DA's office, but sharpened her understanding of how the system failed women who discovered their husbands were criminals. Ava, it's 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. I need your help. Can you meet me at my office? Something in my voice must have conveyed the urgency. 20 minutes, she said, and hung up. Grace arrived looking like she'd thrown on the first clothes she could find, her prosecutorial instincts still sharp despite 3 years in private practice. I showed her everything. The financial transfers, the stolen client data, the photographs of Marcus' briefcase contents. She studied the evidence with the focused intensity that had once made defense attorneys nervous. This is sophisticated, she finally said. Professional-level identity theft combined with financial fraud and corporate espionage. But here's your problem. Everything is technically authorized. Your husband's credentials were used, his biometrics, his passwords. Without proving he wasn't actually present for these transactions, you're looking at a he said, she said situation. But I have proof that Marcus Webb has been impersonating him. An actor who could claim he was hired for a legitimate reason. Maybe Aiden wanted to surprise you. Maybe it was research for something. Without Aiden here to contradict that story, and with him presumably ready to deny everything from wherever he's hiding, the authorities won't act fast enough. By the time they investigate, the money will be gone, and the evidence will disappear. My phone buzzed, not my regular phone, but the encrypted one Sophia had given me, hidden in my desk drawer. The notification showed a new message on an app one didn't recognize. Grace leaned over as I opened it, a single text from an unknown number. Check Aiden's old phone. I looked at Grace. Who else knows about this? Someone who wants you to find something, she said. This feels like breadcrumbs. We drove back to my apartment together. Marcus was still at the gym, his Sunday routine predictable as clockwork. I went straight to Aiden's home office, to the desk drawer where he kept old electronics he claimed to be recycling but never actually disposed of. His previous iPhone sat there, screen cracked from when he dropped it getting out of a taxi 6 months ago. I pressed the power button, not expecting anything. The screen flickered to life, 5% battery, but alive. The phone had been receiving messages for months, while supposedly broken. I opened the messages, with shaking fingers. There was a conversation with Madison Vale going back 8 months, plans, photos, and details that made my blood run cold. The wife suspects nothing. Aiden had written 3 months ago. Marcus is perfect. By the time she figures it out, we'll be untouchable. The most recent message was from yesterday. Tomorrow, we finalize everything. Our usual place in Paris, then disappear forever. Grace stared at the phone screen, her prosecutor's mind already building the case. Tomorrow is Monday. If they're planning to finalize everything, we need to act tonight. I felt something shift inside me, the fear and confusion crystallizing into cold determination. The same focus that helped me unravel million-dollar fraud schemes would now protect what remained of my life. I handed Grace the phone and moved to my laptop with newfound purpose. What are you doing? Grace asked. Setting a trap. Aiden might have stolen my money, but he forgot that I'm the one who knows how to track it. My fingers flew across the keyboard, creating something beautiful in its simplicity, a financial virus disguised as routine investment documents that would appear in our shared cloud storage. The code was elegant, designed to activate the moment anyone accessed our joint accounts from an international IP address. When triggered, it would freeze every transaction, lock down all associated accounts, and simultaneously alert federal investigators to suspicious activity. Is that legal? Grace watched over my shoulder. It's my own account. I'm protecting my assets from theft. Completely legal. I embedded the virus in files labeled Q3 Investment Review and Tax Documents 2024. Aiden's arrogance would be his downfall. He always checked our investments before major decisions, a habit from his banking days that even crime hadn't broken. The apartment door opened. Marcus was back from the gym, whistling something tuneless. Grace and I exchanged glances. She understood immediately, slipping Aiden's phone into her purse while I closed my laptop. Working on Sunday again? Marcus appeared in the doorway, gym bag over his shoulder, performance-perfect sweat on his forehead. You really should take a break. Just finishing up, I said, my voice steady. Grace stopped by to discuss a case we're collaborating on. He nodded at Grace with practiced charm. Good to see you. Will you stay for lunch? Actually, I said, standing up, I was thinking we could have lunch at that place in Astoria, where we went after our honeymoon. They had that amazing grilled octopus. Marcus' smile never wavered, but I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. We'd never been to Astoria together. The real Aiden and I had honeymooned in Santorini, not Greece, as I'd mentioned. But Marcus didn't know that. Astoria, he repeated, buying time. The little taverna, where we danced until dawn. You said it was the most romantic night of your life. Grace watched our exchange like a tennis match, recognizing the test I was administering. Marcus' jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, he said finally, though I thought it was closed for renovations. A complete fabrication to cover his ignorance. The place I described didn't exist. I smiled warmly, playing the devoted wife while documenting another crack in his performance. You're probably right. Let's just order Thai food instead. The relief in his shoulders was visible. Grace excused herself, taking the evidence with her. As Marcus headed to shower, I made 3 phone calls that would light fires under Aiden's carefully constructed scheme. First, Robert Steinberg, CEO of Steinberg Industries and Aiden's biggest client. Robert, I'm so sorry to bother you on Sunday, but I noticed some unusual activity in your company's investment portfolio while reviewing adjacent accounts. Nothing serious, probably just a clerical error, but you might want to have your team take a look. The seed of doubt planted, watered with just enough concern to trigger an internal audit that would discover discrepancies, leading back to Aiden's unauthorized access. Second call, Jennifer Wu at Phoenix Capital. Same approach, different angle, a mysterious transfer that didn't match their usual patterns. So strange, probably nothing but worth checking. Third, David Martinez at Meridian Financial. By Monday morning, 3 major firms would be discovering security breaches that all traced back to credentials associated with Aiden Mercer. My phone rang as I ended the third call. The caller ID showed my mother's assisted living facility in New Jersey. My chest tightened. Sunday afternoon calls usually meant medical emergencies. Mrs. Chen. The voice belonged to Nancy, the facility director. Your mother is fine, but she's quite agitated. She insists someone is lying about your husband visiting her. I'll be right there. The drive to New Jersey took 90 minutes, Marcus believing I was handling a crisis with my mother's medication. The facility sat nestled among trees that were just beginning to turn gold, a peaceful setting for lives in their final chapters. My mother's room overlooked the garden, photos covering every surface, her memories made tangible. Ava. She grabbed my hands the moment I walked in, her grip stronger than her 82 years should allow. That woman is lying. I told her Aiden was here last month, but she says there's no record. Nancy stood in the corner, looking apologetic. The visitor log shows no entry, but Mrs. Chan is adamant. Tell me about his visit, Mom. He came on a Thursday. I remember because it was pudding day. He asked about your father's life insurance, wanted to know if there were other policies besides the one you knew about. I told him about the Northwestern Mutual policy, the one your father never told you about. Aiden said he wanted to make sure you were protected. My blood turned to ice. There had been another policy, one I discovered only after Dad's death, $500,000 that had gone to pay for Mom's care.
Few people knew about it.
Did he ask about anything else? The safety deposit box. He wanted to know which bank, what was in it. I told him about your father's coin collection, the one he thought would be valuable someday. I kissed her forehead, promising to come back soon, and stepped into the hallway with Nancy. Check your security footage from last month. Every Thursday. Nancy pulled up the files on her tablet. We scrolled through weeks of footage, residents coming and going, families visiting, staff changes. Then there he was, August 15th, 2:47 p.m., Aiden walking through the front door, signing the visitor log, spending 43 minutes with my mother. But the log Nancy pulled up, the physical sign-in sheet, photographed and archived. Aiden's name wasn't there. The page showed a gap, as if that line had been skipped entirely. He signed it, Nancy said, bewildered. I watched him sign it. Someone had digitally altered the archived image, removing his signature with surgical precision, but they hadn't thought to check the security footage. Aiden had been planning this for months, gathering information about every asset, every policy, every possible source of money. He'd even targeted my mother, mining her confused memories for financial details. I drove back from New Jersey with the facility's security footage saved on my phone, another piece of evidence in the growing mountain of Aiden's deception. The Sunday evening traffic moved slowly, giving me time to process the calculated cruelty of visiting my mother, extracting financial information from a woman whose mind drifted between decades like a radio searching for signals. My phone buzzed with a message from Kale. Her flight had landed at Charles de Gaulle 3 hours ago. The attached photos made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. Aiden and Madison at the airport currency exchange, his hand on the small of her back with casual intimacy. Another photo showed them getting into a taxi. Madison's head tilted toward his shoulder, both of them laughing at something on his phone. The timestamp showed 4:47 p.m. Paris time. The next photo stopped my breathing for a moment. They stood at the reception desk of the Hotel Lancaster on the Champs-Élysées, a place where rooms started at €800 per night. Madison wore a diamond bracelet I recognized, the one Aiden had supposedly bought for his mother's 70th birthday 6 months ago. The body language between them spoke of practiced comfort, the kind that develops over years, not months, the way she adjusted his collar, the way he guided her through the lobby with proprietary confidence. This wasn't a recent affair. This was a relationship that might have predated our entire marriage. I pulled into our building's garage at 8:30 to find Marcus pacing near the elevator, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, his face rearranged itself into concern, but not fast enough to hide the flash of anxiety underneath. "There you are," he said, ending his call abruptly. "I was getting worried. How's your mother?" "She's fine, just confused about some old financial documents." I watched him process this, saw the slight relaxation in his shoulders when I didn't elaborate. Back in our apartment, I made a decision that would either expose everything or destroy my chance at justice. Sitting across from Marcus at our dining table, I pulled out my phone with deliberate casualness. "I've been thinking," I said, scrolling through my calendar. "Our anniversary is coming up next month. 8 years since that dinner party where we met." Marcus nodded, his actor's training keeping his expression neutral despite the fact that Aiden and I had been married for 7 years, not 8. Another test failed. "I want to do something special. A surprise party Tuesday morning before the markets open. Invite all your colleagues from the firm, your biggest clients. Show them the apartment. Serve champagne and those little pastries from that French place you love." His eyes flickered with confusion. "Tuesday morning? That's unusual timing for a party. You always said the best deals happen before breakfast. Besides, it would be memorable. Different." I pulled up my contacts, letting enthusiasm color my voice. "I'll handle everything. You just need to send the invites tonight. Make it sound exclusive, urgent. Tell them it's important they attend. Marcus hesitated, clearly trying to figure out if this was part of his script or something unexpected. But refusing would break character, and maintaining his cover was paramount. If that's what you want, he said finally. Perfect. Send them now while I make dinner. I want to see their responses. I watched him compose the message on his phone, his fingers moving reluctantly across the screen. Investment banking colleagues, major clients, people whose presence would be impossible to explain away when federal agents arrived. Within minutes, responses started coming in, confusion mixed with agreement. When Aiden Mercer requested your presence, you showed up. While preparing our last dinner together, I felt an unexpected wave of sympathy for Marcus Webb. He was a failed actor from Queens who'd thought he was getting a break, playing a role for what he probably assumed was a reality show or an elaborate prank. Instead, he'd become an accessory to federal crimes, trapped in a performance where the stakes were prison sentences, not bad reviews. I made salmon with asparagus, simple and quick. Marcus sat at the kitchen island, maintaining the illusion of domestic normalcy, while both of us knew something had fundamentally shifted. The script he'd memorized no longer matched the scene being played. Wine, I offered, holding up a bottle of the Malbec we usually shared on Sunday nights. He shook his head quickly. I'm not feeling well. Think I might be coming down with something. The first time in 3 months he'd refused alcohol. His instincts were screaming warnings, even if his conscious mind hadn't fully processed the danger. Marcus, I said quietly, and his whole body went rigid. I'd never called Aiden by the wrong name. I know who you are. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. His face cycled through emotions, surprise, fear, calculation, and finally resignation. When he spoke, the British accent was gone, replaced by pure Brooklyn. How long have you known? Since Tuesday morning, when my sister saw the real Aiden boarding a plane while you sat in our living room. He put his head in his hands, the gesture so genuinely human that my anger flickered. I didn't know about the crimes. I mean, he said you were separated, that he needed someone to house sit, keep up appearances for business reasons, paid me $20,000 in cash to pretend to be him for 3 months. I thought it was weird but legal. Did you really believe that? I wanted to. His voice cracked slightly. I've been auditioning for 15 years, waiting tables, driving delivery trucks, watching younger actors get the parts one wanted. Then this guy shows up, offers me more money than I've ever seen to play a role. I didn't ask questions because I couldn't afford to. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. FBI moving tomorrow morning. Everything in place. I looked at Marcus, this stranger who'd slept in my bed, eaten at my table, participated in a deception that had destroyed my life. But sitting across from him now, seeing the defeat in his shoulders, I recognized another victim of Aiden's manipulation. Tomorrow morning, federal agents are going to arrive. The people you invited will be here to witness it. You can either be arrested as a co-conspirator or cooperate as a witness. Witness, he said immediately. God, witness. I have documents, recordings. He made me keep everything in case you got suspicious. Said it was insurance. Marcus spent the night on our couch after showing me a storage unit key where he'd kept everything, contracts, recordings of phone calls with Aiden, detailed instructions for maintaining the deception. We barely slept, both of us waiting for the dawn that would end this elaborate performance. At 5:47 a.m., my phone rang. They got them, Kale said, her voice carrying exhaustion and satisfaction in equal measure. French police arrested them at Charles de Gaulle. They were trying to board a connecting flight to Switzerland. I put her on speaker so Marcus could hear. He sat up on the couch, the blanket I'd given him pulled around his waist, looking like a man about to hear his own verdict. The arrest was dramatic, Kale continued. They were in the premium lounge when police arrived. Madison started crying, claiming she didn't know anything about any crimes. But Aiden, his composure finally cracked. He tried to run. They tackled him right there in front of everyone. Someone filmed it. It's already on European news channels. Marcus closed his eyes, perhaps realizing how close he'd come to being in those handcuffs himself. I walked to the kitchen and began making coffee, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. The apartment would soon fill with witnesses to the culmination of Aiden's deception. By 7:30 a.m., the first guests began arriving. Robert Steinberg from Steinberg Industries, looking confused but curious. Jennifer Wu from Phoenix Capital, dressed impeccably despite the unusual hour. David Martinez, several junior partners from Aiden's firm, clients whose portfolios represented billions in managed assets. They clustered in our living room, accepting coffee and making awkward small talk about the mysterious urgency of the invitation. "This better be worth it, Aiden," Robert said to Marcus, who stood frozen by the window. Marcus looked at me, panic evident in his eyes. The script hadn't prepared him for this. I stepped forward, playing the gracious hostess one final time. "Thank you all for coming. I know the timing is unusual, but you'll understand in a moment why your presence is so important." At 7:58 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Marcus heard them too, his face going pale. The doorbell rang once, formally, followed immediately by firm knocking. "Federal agents. We have a warrant." The room erupted in confused murmurs as I opened the door. 6 FBI agents entered, their presence immediately transforming our apartment from social gathering to crime scene. The lead agent, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, held up her credentials. "Agent Sarah Brennan, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We're looking for Aiden Mercer." "That's me," Marcus said, his Brooklyn accent bleeding through the British veneer. "Except it's not." He looked at Agent Brennan with desperate relief. "I want to cooperate. I have evidence." I was hired to impersonate him. The room fell silent, except for someone's coffee cup hitting a saucer too hard. Robert Steinberg's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Jennifer Wu pulled out her phone, probably calculating her firm's exposure to whatever was unfolding. "Mr. Webb," Agent Brennan said, clearly already knowing his real name. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and money laundering." As they cuffed Marcus, he looked at me with something like gratitude. "The storage unit on Queens Boulevard," he said quickly. "Unit 447. Everything's there." While agents read Marcus's rights, my laptop chimed with a notification I'd been expecting. The financial virus had activated. On my screen, I watched in real time as accounts across the Caymans, Switzerland, and Cyprus froze simultaneously, $47 million in stolen funds locked in digital amber. Transaction records automatically forwarded to federal prosecutors, the IRS, the SEC. Every agency that Aiden thought he'd evaded now had a complete record of his crimes. "Mrs. Mercer," Agent Brennan approached me while her team secured Marcus. "We'll need you to come with us for a formal statement." "Of course, but first, these people deserve to know why they're here." I picked up my phone, finding the recording of Kale's call from Tuesday morning. Her voice filled the room, clear and professional. "I need to ask you something strange. Your husband, is he home right now?" The recording played through those first moments of discovery. The gathered executives listened with growing comprehension, understanding dawning on their faces. They weren't here for an anniversary party. They were witnesses to the unraveling of a massive fraud that could have destroyed their companies. "Your husband," Agent Brennan addressed the room while her team worked, "has been stealing corporate secrets and facilitating insider trading using information obtained through his wife's forensic accounting work. The man you've been meeting with for the past 3 months was Mr. Webb, hired to maintain the illusion while the real Aiden Mercer attempted to flee with stolen assets." David Martinez sank into our couch, calculating his firm's exposure. Jennifer Wu was already on the phone with her legal team, but Robert Steinberg walked over to me, his expression shifting from shock to something like admiration. "You figured it out. You set this up." I nodded, exhausted suddenly. He counted on me not noticing, or not being able to prove it if I did. "The audit irregularities you mentioned Sunday were real. Your systems were compromised, but now the FBI has everything they need to trace exactly what was taken and how." Agent Brennan's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, then looked at me. "French authorities confirmed they have Aiden Mercer and Madison Vale in custody." They'll be extradited to face charges here. The apartment that had been our home, our sanctuary, was now a crime scene. Agents photographed everything, collected evidence, treated our life together as exhibits in a federal case. The assembled witnesses gradually left, each stopping to offer awkward condolences or confused gratitude. As the last agent prepared to leave, Agent Brennan handed me a card. "We'll need you to testify. Your forensic work, the virus you created to track the money, it's the foundation of our case." "I'll be there," I said, meaning it. The apartment fell silent. I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of Marcus' last performance, his coffee cup still on the counter, the blanket he'd used on the couch, the notes he'd hidden throughout the apartment to remember his lines. Props in a play that had finally ended. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Video from Charles de Gaulle, shaky but clear. Aiden in handcuffs, his perfect composure shattered, being led through the airport while travelers stopped to stare. Madison beside him, designer makeup streaked with tears, her Parisian dream ending in French police custody. I watched the video one more time before closing my laptop. Aiden's arrest, playing out in grainy airport footage that had somehow become the most watched clip on financial news channels. The timestamp in the corner read 6 months ago, but it felt like a lifetime had passed since that Tuesday morning when my world split in two. The apartment stood empty around me now. Our furniture sold or donated, walls bearing pale rectangles where artwork once hung. The movers had taken the last boxes yesterday, leaving only the echoes of a marriage that had been more performance than partnership. I stood at the windows overlooking Manhattan, keys heavy in my hand, waiting for the building manager, who would take possession in 20 minutes. The divorce proceedings had moved with unusual speed once federal prosecutors presented their case. Aiden's attorney, working from a French detention center while fighting extradition, had little leverage against evidence of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge, a woman who'd seen enough financial crimes to recognize predatory behavior, had been particularly unsympathetic to a husband who had hired an actor to replace himself while liquidating marital assets. The settlement left me with more than I'd expected: the apartment sale proceeds, recovered funds from the frozen accounts, and damages that Aiden's insurance company paid rather than face a public trial. Money couldn't buy back 3 months of sleeping next to a stranger or 7 years with a man capable of such deception, but it could buy freedom to rebuild. My phone rang, showing a client appointment reminder. The irony wasn't lost on me that my trauma had become my specialty. The office space I'd leased in the Flatiron District bore a simple brass nameplate: Chin Forensic Consulting, specialist in marital asset protection and identity verification. What started as word-of-mouth referrals had grown into a waiting list of women who suspected their realities had been edited. Just last week, I'd helped a surgeon from the Upper East Side discover her husband of 15 years had been using deepfake technology to appear at medical conferences while actually running a separate practice in Miami. The week before, a Broadway producer learned her spouse had hired 3 different lookalikes to maintain alibis across multiple cities. Each case felt like excavating layers of deception with the same tools that had saved my own life. The building manager arrived, accepting the keys with professional detachment. As I rode the elevator down for the last time, my phone buzzed with a text from Kale. "Giovanni's at 7. My treat." Giovanni's hadn't changed in 40 years, still serving the same red sauce recipes our grandmother had declared the only acceptable Italian food outside of Naples. The vinyl booths remained patched with duct tape, the checkered tablecloths bore decades of wine stains, and the owner's son still couldn't pronounce bruschetta correctly despite being third-generation Italian-American. Kale waited at our usual corner booth, a bottle of Chianti already open. She stood when she saw me, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than necessary. We'd grown closer through this ordeal, the shared trauma creating a bond that went beyond sisterhood. "You did it," she said, pouring wine into glasses that looked like they'd survived both world wars. "The apartment's really gone. Handed over the keys 20 minutes ago." I took a sip, the cheap wine tasting like childhood Sunday dinners. "Feels strange. 7 years erased in an afternoon." "Not erased, transformed." Kale raised her glass. To the woman who figured out her husband was in two places at once and brought down an international fraud ring. To the pilot who made the phone call that saved my life, I countered. We drank, the ritual of it more important than the wine. Kale had carried guilt about that morning for months, convinced she'd destroyed my marriage with one phone call. I tried explaining that she'd revealed the destruction, not caused it, but survivor's guilt doesn't respond well to logic. I have something for you, she said, pulling an envelope from her purse. It arrived at my building yesterday, addressed to you care of me. The return address showed Dayton, Ohio. Marcus Webb's handwriting, careful and precise. I opened it slowly, not sure I wanted to hear from the man who'd lived my life for 3 months. Dear Ava, the letter began. I wanted to reach out now that the legal proceedings are finished. First, thank you for not pressing additional charges. The FBI had enough, without your testimony, to give me probation and community service instead of prison time. I'm teaching acting classes at a community college here, finally using my skills for something honest. I tell my students about those 3 months, about how the best performance of my life was also the worst thing I'd ever done. Some roles, I tell them, aren't worth playing, no matter how much they pay. I think about you sometimes, wondering how someone recovers from what Aiden did. Then I read about your new firm, about the women you're helping, and I understand that you've turned poison into medicine. That's a kind of strength I didn't know existed. The storage unit had one item I didn't give the FBI, a photo from your wedding that was in Aiden's instruction packet. You looked genuinely happy. I'm sorry I was part of taking that from you. I hope someday you find something real to replace what was stolen. With sincere regret and genuine admiration, Marcus Webb. Folded inside the letter was the photograph, Aiden and me cutting our wedding cake, both of us laughing at something off camera. I studied my younger self, trying to remember what had been funny enough to cause such genuine joy. The memory wouldn't come. He seems genuinely sorry, Cale observed, reading over my shoulder. He was a victim, too, in his way. Aiden destroyed multiple lives chasing money that's now frozen in federal custody. I tucked the photo back in the envelope. Marcus just had the misfortune of being desperate enough to take the role. We ordered our usual pasta arrabbiata for me, linguine vongole for Cale, with enough garlic bread to concern a cardiologist. The familiar flavors tasted like home, like continuity in a life that had been completely reimagined. What's next? Cale asked, spinning pasta with practiced ease. Rebecca Harrison tomorrow, CEO of a tech startup. She thinks her husband might be using AI to fake business trips. Then Thursday, the Whitman case. I meant for you, not work. I considered the question, letting it sit between us like another dinner guest. 6 months ago, I'd thought my future was mapped out in comfortable predictability. Now, at 37, I was single, successful in a field I'd invented, and completely uncertain about everything except my next client appointment. I don't know, I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. And that's oddly liberating. If this story of calculated revenge kept you hooked until the very end, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Ava served Marcus shrimp scampi, knowing the real Aiden was deathly allergic, and watched the impostor eat it, without a single reaction. What was your most jaw-dropping moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories of betrayal and justice. Subscribe to The Hidden Truths and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.